Soldier On acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to traditional lands and waters and would like to pay respect to their elders, both past and present. Soldier On would also like to acknowledge the unique nature of military service and the valuable contribution made by former and current defence members and their families to our nation. Content warning. The following episode may contain personal accounts of service, trauma, and mental health. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to Saluting Their Service, Contemporary Voices of Bravery, a podcast series which looks at the lives of veterans who have served and the journey they've taken in a life beyond service. My name's Paul Singer, I'm the CEO of Soldier On, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Alison Gordon. Ali's story is a remarkable one, from the South Pole to the North Pole, quite literally, and so much in between. Welcome, Ali.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So let's start at the beginning. Paint us a picture of what your childhood was like. What were your interests? What was it like growing up?
I would imagine I was like many kids that go on to join the military. I was an active kid. I was relatively academic. And I was also a child of the military system, so we moved around a lot. I had a great, stable, beautiful family life, and feel really privileged to be able to say that. But it was a happy childhood, not one that I thought would lead me to the military. But
is that right?
Yeah.
So even despite being a daughter of a signals officer, and we'll come to that shortly, it didn't touch on you that you thought you might pursue a career in the military?
No, because as a kid, when your parents, one of your parents or both are in the military, you find yourself moving every year or two, and from a sort of a selfish, belligerent kid's perspective, you're just leaving your friends all the time, and that feels a little jarring. I was lucky we had great support systems and we coped really well, but I didn't think I would be drawn to a life where you have to keep uprooting your home and moving as a kid, because it was being the new kid in a new school's tough.
It would be, I could imagine. So what were your interests? What is it that entertained you outside of school?
I was quite active in sport. I played a lot of basketball. I swam a lot. I played musical instruments, just all normal kid stuff. And I got to do it in a lot of different places, which in hindsight was really nice. I had a bigger friends group and more exposure to different activities. And I remember one thing that was again a real privilege that not everyone gets to experience was my dad took long service leave when I was about 9, and we all got in a car in a caravan and spent 6 months driving around Australia.
Wow! And
I know that not everyone gets to do that, but that was such an incredible experience. To understand geography and different perspectives and different ways of life within Australia. So I had a pretty great childhood.
That's so cool. And I suspect we might touch on that a little later too, because there's a strand there that reflects what you're currently doing, but we'll come to that a little later. So when you mentioned that you had a lot of connections and a lot of friends from different areas, was it difficult to stay in touch with them as you moved around?
Yeah, I think so. I remember having a lot of pen pals, but, inevitably as you get to your later teenage years, you just become quite consumed in your present life. And I think a lot of them dropped off, except about 2 or 3 that I still have contact with today. So, you don't lose all your friends as you move around. There are some really special ones that I've managed to keep in contact with.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned that you were the child of a military family. So the military and the defence environment wasn't foreign to you. Your dad was a signals officer. And in fact, your grandfather, I understand, was a decorated bomber pilot in World War II.
He was, yeah.
So what was it that inspired you to join the military then?
Not that. I say that, not that. But again, as a somewhat recalcitrant teenager, I didn't think I wanted that. I didn't think that would be the life I would choose. But embarrassingly, I got to sort of year 11 and started applying for different universities. And although I was accepted, I wasn't passionate about any particular one avenue. I just didn't really understand exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And I suppose it was the exposure I'd had through my father and through my grandfather that I knew that the military existed. And without that, I probably would have taken a very different path, gone to uni and done something, and just, life would be very different. But it was that exposure that made me think, well, if nothing else, I'll get an education and I will serve my country doing remarkable things while I figure it out.
So growing up, particularly during those teenage years, do you have recollection of conversations either with your father or your grandfather about their own military experiences?
Yeah, my father was writing a book about my grandfather's service. So I remember starting to be a little inquisitive, certainly not inquisitive enough as retrospectively, I probably should have taken a lot more interest. And so it started to dawn on me that this was quite a big opportunity as a career and would have a lasting legacy. And I think the thing that really stuck out was when my father was writing this book about my grandfather, he would get together with all of my grandfather's serving friends, and they still had this incredible bond. These, very aging men that had all served together in World War II, they would come back together in these little, the book launch, for instance, and they would just have this incredible bond. And that really stood out to me. I was like, wow, this environment creates friendships that stand the test of time. And I think that was very interesting to me. But my decision to join go to the Defence Force Academy when I was in high school was actually because a girl 12 months ahead of me did it. And I spoke to her more than I spoke to my father about it.
And that must have been quite impressionable upon you then, because you chose to go to the Australian Defence Force Academy here in Canberra. What was that like?
I knew nothing. I had nothing to compare it to, but I remember just being quite a shy teenage girl, just with eyes wide open and pretty much terrified of everything. But I liked it. I liked the challenge. I liked the physical challenge. I liked the academic challenge. I liked the team environment. I liked that it was high intensity and there was always something happening. And I liked that it really put me out of my comfort zone. So I enjoyed it.
Do you feel like you thrived in that environment?
I did, yeah. I feel like it was a good fit for me at that point in time.
Are there any particular standout memories from your time at the Defence Force Academy?
So many cringeworthy moments where I was a blundering cadet. But the standouts are the friends that I made and the friends that I've kept. It is one of the biggest privileges we have in the military is the people we serve with, and it started on day one of ADFA, and I still keep in touch with those people.
Isn't that incredibly special? Yeah. All this time later, still remaining in touch and in close contact with those people that you met day one, presumably carrying your ironing board into ADFA.
Yes.
All of these wonderful memories as ADFA cadets come down the highway with ironing boards and luggage in tow, haircuts to be had. I mean, it's a really strange time, isn't it, for someone fresh out of school? What have they got themselves into?
And I remember, in that period and done true and following, some of these people see you at some of your most fragile and vulnerable and worst moments, unshowered and fatigued and hungry and succeeding or failing. They see it all. And I found that when, I've faced challenges in, personal, professional lives in subsequent years, they've been the people I've turned to because they've seen you at your worst and they stood by you then. They're going to stand by you again.
They're formative times and strong bonds, aren't they?
100%.
So you finish at ADFA and you head across the hill to RMC. What was that like for you?
I found RMC somewhat more challenging than ADFA. The intensity was lifted for sure. There wasn't like a natural, obvious path for me in what I was going to do after this. It was very necessary, at Duntroon you learn how to be an infantry officer, or that you need the foundations of being an army officer. And I knew it was all relevant, but I also knew that probably wasn't going to be exactly what I was going to be doing in my career, because at that time females couldn't go to the infantry. I'm not sure that I would have chosen it if they could. So there was a lot of intense training in an area that was going to be foundationally applicable, but not directly what I was going to be doing. So it was it was a real challenge, but I knew that the outcome would be worth it. And back in those days, there was a much smaller ratio of of females to males, and so we were a smaller minority, which was irrelevant in any other way except that the female cohort of our class was really tightly bounded.
And I saw some of that being of a similar vintage, and I recognised and observed just how close those bonds were, how strong those relationships were. It seemed to me that you developed an incredible dynamic between each of you to sort of bring out the best in that group. Is that something that stuck with you as far as your relationships over that time?
Oh, yes. Yeah, those girls are still the people that I turn to when times get tough.
So you're coming towards the end of your time at RMC, and it's time to choose your core or put in your preferences. So what was the thinking there? What was going through your mind as you were looking to life after RMC?
A lot of naivety, probably. I had done an IT degree at the Defence Academy, so I suppose I was naturally bent towards communications. But it was also the obvious choice because so much else was eliminated. Back then, females couldn't go to the arms corps. I was also colourblind, which eliminated electrical and mechanical engineers. It didn't eliminate transport, but I figured I would just be the laughing stock if I got to a corps and then couldn't drive a vehicle, because despite having a license, I can drive a car on our national roads. You can't drive a military vehicle if you're colourblind. So I didn't want to not contribute in a particular corps. So my degree and the fact that the Royal Australian Corps of Signals didn't mind that I was colourblind just made it a really obvious choice.
Did your dad's service have any bearing on that decision?
No, it didn't. I mean, it made me more aware of the Corps, but that's not what drove the decision.
So take me to graduation day. What were the feelings? What was it like? Who was there supporting you?
I imagine it was like everyone else, with the added privilege, or for me, pride of having my dad there for sure. In fact, it was a funny time. He'd been deployed to East Timor as the deputy force commander, and he had to apply for leave to come back for my graduation, and he'd done so, and he'd come back on promotion. And so when he was coming back, especially for this event, which was obviously very important to him as well, to be there to support me, he said, I have to come in uniform. I said, Dad, I understand, and it's not that I'm not proud of you, but I'd really like you to just be there as Dad. Could you just come in a suit? And I didn't understand at the time, but it was his first event as his promoted rank, and they all like to get together in uniform and have a morning tea, and so that was why he had to come in uniform. And when he said that, I was like, oh, okay, do what you need to do. That's absolutely fine. I don't want to take this moment away from him as well. And in retrospect, I'm really glad it worked out that way. I couldn't have been prouder that he was there. And my mum, she had just spent so long supporting Dad and his career, and she was, doing the same for me at the start of mine. So it was really wonderful to have them there, and my brother and my sister. And then my dad came to the graduation ceremony that night, not in uniform. So I feel like he sort of compromised absolutely where he could.
And I should imagine a really proud moment, obviously, as it is for any parent, but for him to be celebrating such a career milestone for himself, but wanting to do it at his daughter's graduation. That's pretty amazing.
It was really special. Yeah.
So you touched on it before. Your dad's actually serving in Timor. That's probably the focus of our operational activity as far as the Australian Defence Force is concerned at this time.
At that time.
What were you thinking life would look like as you leave RMC and head to your first unit?
So ROBC, 6 months for those in Signals Corps. So I was excited to do that, and my first unit, I just knew that there would be real training. I knew that it was a time where where we'd had a period of peace for many, many, many years, and that was changing. And I didn't celebrate the fact that we didn't have peace anymore, but I did enjoy that we were doing good training, that was real and operations focused.
And what was the notion of leadership to you at that point, and how did that sit with you as you're starting to lead troops for the first time?
Oh, this is a question that I'm almost a bit embarrassed about my answer, because at the time I thought I was doing the very best leadership I could, but I look back and think I was so young and had so much to learn. I think I mentioned before, when I was at RMC, there wasn't a lot of people that I could look up to as role models that I could really relate to. You know, the idea is you can't be what you can't see. There wasn't a lot of women in leadership roles where I could think, that makes sense to me. That's how I would like to lead. I had to, the leadership models I'd been presented didn't really ring true to sort of authentic leadership for me. And it took me many, many, many years, way too many years, to work out what that looked like for me. And that's why I'm a bit embarrassed. I wish I'd known as a young lieutenant what authentic leadership looked like to me. But instead, I just kept trying to do what I'd been taught and what I could see. And it wasn't till I was, a more senior captain, when I said, no, this is how it makes sense to me. And as soon as I realized that, leadership felt so much more natural. It had such better results. I think I allowed the people that I was trying to lead to feel more seen and to feel like they were more cared for in the way that I was desperately trying to do, but couldn't execute as well until I really worked out who I was.
Which is so understandable, particularly during those early years. I mean, the privilege of leadership is something that's thrust upon young officers at a very, very early stage in their career. How did that tension sit with you as you're learning about leadership while you're expected to be a leader?
I just felt as if I knew I was doing my best, but I didn't feel like I was nailing it all the time. And maybe you never do. You never get to leadership and think, yes, done. I don't need to learn anymore. It doesn't work like that. But at the start, I think it manifested in not as much confidence as I wish I'd had. I think I was making decisions based on values and trying to do the right thing. But I don't think I was doing it with the confidence that I later had.
Yeah. So how did that play out in those early postings? What did those early postings look like? Where were you? What were you doing?
I had some really, really great jobs. I felt so lucky. My first job was troop command. I had 2 different troops. I remember having some, my troop sergeants were really experienced, really knowledgeable, really smart. Signals Corps is full of smart soldiers, really smart men, and they were men. I later had some women as well, but in this instance, they were men. And I just remember thinking sometimes, oh, you poor thing, you get new lieutenants in every couple of years. But they were so gracious. They took the time to work with me and help me learn and support my decisions and gently guide me, as is their job to do. So I had a really great troop command, and then I did a year of platoon command at Wagga at the recruit training centre. And that was eye-opening again, because it was my first exposure to back in an all-corps environment, a recruit training, and seeing almost like the journey that I'd taken as a cadet, seeing it as an instructor with recruits. That was really, really interesting. And I was really privileged to, my first 2 years as a troop commander, have my first deployment to the Solomon Islands, Australia's effort to help the Solomon Island government do their weapons armistice. That was really interesting. I felt like it was really good work. It was humanitarian work at the Corps, with some really interesting politics going on behind it. So yeah, I had a really, really great time there. And then I think one of my favorite jobs in the Army followed Recruit Training Centre, and that was an operations officer. I really, really loved that job. I worked with incredible people in a really high tempo environment. Lots of focus on Iraq at the time, and just some fascinating work. So
So what was it in particular about that role that you enjoyed so much?
The culture we had within the operations cell, I think, was really wonderful. I had some incredibly talented and experienced warrant officers who understood intent and could work to intent, and we were doing good work. And so I think if you combine that, it was good people and good purpose.
Yeah, yeah. And your career, of course, is evolving as operational tempo is increasing. Yeah. We're transitioning from our activities in Timor-Leste. You mentioned the Solomon Islands. And then, of course, there's a significant focus over quite a number of years in the Middle East, first in Iraq and then Afghanistan. How did that feel, being part of an army that was dealing with this really, and responding to this very high operational tempo?
It felt consequential. You know, the jobs, they had an impact. The way you resourced your soldiers for training had an impact. If you mucked that up and if you didn't make sure they were trained, then you were doing them a disservice, because at any point, any of them could be sent overseas, and you could all be sent overseas together. So it just felt real.
I think one of the things I often hear is that people felt they were training to do a job that they could see and feel and knew that was just around the corner of the next person to deploy in many respects. And, you know, your notion of saying that it felt real, there was a genuine sense that people were training for something that was very tangible.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And there were many generations that preceded us that didn't have that privilege.
Yeah.
They were training and often involved in peacetime operations, but never necessarily got to deploy on operations.
Yeah, that was a real contrast, because you could see some of the far more senior people who hadn't sort of trained and grown up in that high tempo, you know, fighting for resources, but equally being better resource than they ever had been, because it was all leading to significant events. So I really felt that, and it was, in one sense, oh gosh, it feels awful to say, because I having been and served in Afghanistan, I would never wish that upon anyone. But it felt as if I was doing important and worthy work, and at the same time, it felt just a little terrifying.
Mm. So, can you tell us a little more about those experiences?
Well, I think it sort of, after the operations officer job, I had a really great 12 months at the School of Langs, actually. That was amazing. And then... What
language were you studying?
I was studying Mandarin.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's going to come back and help later on?
It sure is, yes. So after the School of Langs, I went back into sort of I went to as an instructor to Duntroon, actually. And again, the curriculum had changed so significantly since I was a cadet, because we were now heavily in the Middle East. So the curriculum was all changing to sort of more urban and stability operations, rather than jungle warfare that we'd learnt. And it was after that where the following roles were really operationally focused. I spent some time with Special Operations Command, and that was all very, very operationally focused. And it was in Special Operations Command that I served in Afghanistan, and that was it was a really intense time, and it was really challenging and really heartbreaking. But also there were moments where you see the good in humanity, and I think I really hold on to those, because the rest of it was, it was sad and difficult to rationalize in some ways. You know, the loss of life, and I know that we were doing the work that was asked of us. I know that we were doing good in many, many, many ways, but it was also just hard to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we know that on the ground it was so messy, so ambiguous, so complex for so many people. Could you feel at the time and in the moment that what you're doing was having an impact?
It did, yeah, it really did. I felt that when I was there, I was contributing to doing some good, to helping the local population, in many, many ways. And that was my grounding. I was like, no, I can do this, and we can make someone's life better today. And there were also the moments of humanity I was speaking about. That I wasn't going out on patrols like the units that I was supporting in the special forces were, but they would go out for 4 days. They have to eat obviously, but they don't want to carry too much in their pack because they're just carrying a lot of weight. So they would take as minimal food as they could get away with. And then if they came back at, say, after 4 days of patrolling at 2 a.m. in the morning, they'd be hungry. And the canteen there was run by locals. So we employed local employees to run the canteen. But, it wasn't in their employment contract to get up at 2 a.m. and feed these guys. So we had 2 Australian catering corps gents there, and it was just so wonderful to see that they would get up at 2 a.m. and make sure that there was some, meat pies and sausage rolls or something.
Isn't that
so
fantastic?
These guys could come back and have some food. And I was often on shift or, up at that point for whatever reason. And so, you just want to go in and help out and say to these guys, thanks, that was a rough 4 days. I saw that it was a rough 4 days because we've got a big ops screen with, video feeds of everything that's going on. And thanks for doing what you're doing. Welcome home.
Yeah.
So, there's moments where you can just see the good and the support, and they were really special.
It's just one of those common themes that runs through all of our defence history. Mates looking after mates, mucking in together, helping each other out, rolling up your sleeves, regardless of what your role is, just to help someone out and make their day just that little bit better.
I hated that they would go out. Sometimes they would leave at 1 a.m. and they would leave and they would just leave to an empty compound because everyone was sleeping, and it'd break my heart. I was thinking, no, we should be out there saying, attaboy, come back.
So you served for 17 years in the Australian Army. Are there any particular experiences or lessons that really stand out for you and have influenced the person you are today?
I think it's quite a repetitive statement, but the thing that I hold on to most dearly is the people and the friendships that I've made. But I think one of the lessons that I learnt most strongly was when I was an officer commanding. It was my final job before I transitioned, and I learnt it from the brigade commander, and he said to me, if you ever don't know what to do, I was an independent subunit commander, so he was my direct report. He said, if you ever don't know what to do, if you ever don't know what decision to make, and you can't get the guidance that you need, make a values-based decision. And I heard that deeply, and though he told me, there was at one point where I suppose I didn't follow that enough, and that experience really reinforced the lesson for me. I was like, oh no, I should have. It wasn't that I didn't make a values-based decision, actually. I just probably didn't make the best decision for the soldier at the time. And through no malice, just through probably more ignorance than anything. But it really reinforced that you need to always follow your values and stay true to your values, or you will just feel awful about yourself, which I did. And that lesson, I think I've really carried through with me. And the other big one was actually from my dad very early on. And he said to me, Alison, if you have the privilege of leading soldiers, you need to know them as well as their mothers and love them as much. And I tried to implement that, but sort of only was really successful at it when I was more authentic. But that has also carried through into my transition life, where I've had also leadership roles and found that, combining those two things, values-based decisions and really, looking after they're not soldiers anymore, but the people that you are responsible for, if you put them first and deep actually care for them, like authentically care for them, then you will get amazing results.
Isn't that a wonderfully simple but poignant lesson?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel really privileged to have both of those bits of advice.
So as you're thinking about transitioning, do you know what you want to do when you leave the Army?
Not long term. During my last couple of years in the Army, I went on an incredible trip. For my dad's 60th birthday, my mum sent the whole family down to Antarctica. So after doing this trip, I remember thinking, wow, if I ever want to get out of the army, I kind of want to do that for a little while. And so it was in the back of my mind, but at that point I wasn't really seriously looking at getting out of the army. But a few things changed in the subsequent years, and then I was looking to transition, and that was still there. And I thought, why not do that until I figure out what I really want to do? Much like joining the army, I'll just do this until I figure out what I really want to do. And then I decided I really wanted to be in the army for a while. And so after the army, I just thought, maybe I'll just try that. And it could be sort of a transition job, so to speak.
So how does one get into leading polar expeditions?
Because I'd been on that trip, I'd maintained contact with the expedition leader of that trip, just because he was a really great guy, and he'd sort of gotten to know my family, and he'd married an Australian. He was Canadian, but he married an Australian, so he felt like he had a connection to some Australians, and we'd stayed in contact. And when I was on that trip, I remember I had a Mandarin requalification period coming up. So I remember in my spare time, I was sitting up in the bar on the ship reviewing Mandarin text. And he'd said to me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I've got a Mandarin test when I get back. I've got to study a little bit." And he said, "Oh, that's fascinating." And so when I got back, he'd sort of contacted me a little while later and said, "Hey, we're looking to expand our presence in the Chinese market, and we want to be able to we want to have someone on the ship that working for us that can speak the language. Would you consider coming?" And that's it. Yes, I absolutely would.
Just jumped at it.
So it was an opportunity, and that came at exactly the right time. And I just thought this is amazing. Yes, I declared that I wasn't a particularly strong Mandarin linguist, and my focus for the language had been on bilateral relations and non-nuclear proliferation. I didn't know how to say penguin in Mandarin, but that I could probably learn. So he was okay with that.
Now I just find this fascinating. So you're now finding yourself leading polar expeditions to the South Pole, to the North Pole.
Yeah.
Presumably having to learn a whole host of new skills around marine biology, glaciology, ornithology.
Yeah.
Learning about the history of the poles. What was that like for you? Because this is a whole new world for you, having left the army.
It's a whole new world. And Paul, this is why I loved it so much, and why it was such a good transition job for me, because in many ways it used many of my military skills. We'd been taught a lot about risk assessment and a lot about working in challenging physical environments. And this also was a small team environment. So all of that felt really, really familiar and really comfortable. The part that was a real challenge was exactly what you identified. It is the learning of a whole new ecosystem. And I'm not talking about an ecosystem of policy. I'm talking about an actual ecosystem, What do the penguins eat, and what eats what the penguin eats, and how does that all fit together? And the glaciology. It was an absolute joy because as I learnt more, it felt like the place became more rich to see, because you understood the mechanics of the second and third order effects of this bird doing that results in what changes. It was a really wonderful time.
This is something that very few of us get to experience, and you've done it multiple times, and that is travelling to either the South or North Pole. Can you paint us a picture of what it's like? What does a normal day in Antarctica look like?
So Antarctica is our operations, and I wasn't working on research stations. I was working on ship-based tourism. So there's, it's not as altruistic as what some people think initially when I say I work there, but it is inspiring, and I think I really took that away. So an average trip to Antarctica is about 9 days. They go up to 21 or 22 days, so they can be much longer. Of that 9 days, about 4 days will be sailing north and south across the notorious Drake Passage, the most turbulent body of water in the world. So that's always interesting. If what sort of passage you get. You can expect cyclones to roll through there every 3 or 4 days. So you're likely to get some rough weather.
And as an army officer, how did you deal with the seasickness?
Oh, not that well at the start, but I did get used to it. I did improve.
Whereabouts were you departing from?
The southern tip of Patagonia in a small town called Ushuaia.
Yeah.
Yep. So from Ushuaia down to the Antarctic Peninsula, which is fascinating geopolitically. And then you'll spend 4 or 5 days on the peninsula itself. And in those days, the aim, although the ship is remarkably comfortable, the aim is to get off the ship as much as possible. So you have an early breakfast and then get out and do a morning excursion, and you'll be out for 3 or 4 hours prior to lunch, come back for lunch, and then do the same thing in the afternoon, and then have some sort of evening activity. Not like, we're not talking a big cruise ship type, boas and feathers and a show, but it's a more small group activities. It might just be a story around the bar or some sort of quiz night or something. But again, the focus is off the ship, and those days are long and, very dynamic. You can have great weather in the morning and then it can turn in the afternoon, and you can all of a sudden have katabatic, which is big gravity-fed winds. You can have incredibly large swells, and you're driving the little the rigid hull, or the zodiacs, the zodiacs around, and seeing, like, looking at glaciers, walking on land, seeing penguins, looking at the whales, watching icebergs roll and crumble before you. It's phenomenal.
Did you feel, as I might imagine it would have, but did it test you? Was it an environment that tested you?
It did. It absolutely did. It tested me for a few reasons. So physically, I don't do that well with the cold, which may sound like I chose a ridiculous transition career. So I was constantly cold. In my army career, I learned how to drive a Zodiac, but not around icebergs and ice, and so there was that challenge. It was a guest-focused job, so you had the challenge of dealing with paying people who had incredibly high expectations. So that was always a challenge. But the one that I found really interesting was, as I started and spent a few years in that company, I started to progress through the ranks, so to speak, and started ending up with leadership jobs. And in the army, my leadership style, particularly as I'd sort of refined it, was a very nurturing, very sort of democratic leadership style. I really I liked people to feel bought into the decisions, and really wanted to create a cohesive team. So my leadership style was very, I suppose, motherly. And then I applied exactly the same leadership style to the teams on the ships who weren't military people. They were people made up from many, many nations in the world, very different ages, very different experiences. There was doctors of glaciology and ornithology, and people who had just done a lot of different things. And so if I applied exactly the same quite nurturing style that had worked for me in the military.
And taking your dad's advice.
Taking my dad's advice, it was jarring to them. I was too militant, even though from a baseline of the military, I was very nurturing. Exactly the same style was too militant for them. So I learnt really quickly that you actually have to change your leadership to fit the situation. And so I had to find other ways, and I didn't mind this. This was a great challenge and a real privilege to learn that you can keep adjusting your leadership to get the best results based on who you're leading.
And what was it like travelling to the North Pole? Was it similar in terms of routine and the types of expeditions you'd lead, or completely different? Completely
different. I suppose similar in that it was ship-based, and similar in that the aim was to get out into the wild and experiencing these profoundly beautiful places. But they're just it sounds silly to say, but the polar regions are so vastly different. At the base of it, Antarctica is a landmass surrounded by sea, whereas the North Pole is an ocean surrounded by land, and the land is owned by different countries, and the countries are inhabited by people. So that automatically completely changes the vibe of what the place is about. In Antarctica, penguins, who are a massive feature of the expeditions, they return to the same colony. So I know that I can go to a particular island on the peninsula, and I most likely see these penguins there at this time. Whereas in the Arctic, the animals are all hunted. There's a lot of predators up there, including people. And so finding the animals is very, very much harder. And there is a much richer human history in the Arctic. Of course, the Antarctic has got some phenomenal stories of polar exploration, like Scott and Mawson, the Great Australian, and Shackleton. They're all wonderful, wonderful stories. But in the Arctic, there are human inhabitants of the Arctic, and to understand how they thrive and what their challenges are is. I think it makes it, for me, who studied a lot of history and geopolitics, I found that eminently more fascinating, and I was really drawn to time in the Arctic as a result.
And how did you balance your time? How is it you'd prepare for a trip to the south and then sometime later a trip to the north? I mean, what did a year look like for you?
So we just follow the summers. So we do an austral summer, so from, say, October, November through to March in Antarctica. And you could work as much of that season as you sort of wanted. You need a break after a time. I am hesitant to compare it to an operation because I don't want to insult all those who have deployed. But the days are sort of quite like that. You're always on, you get up early, you go to bed late, and then you repeat the next day, and you do that for your whole contract. The difference is no one's shooting at you, which makes it eminently more comfortable. So, you can do that, and we do that for the summer, and then you'd have a month or two off, and then you'd start preparing for the northern summer, which would go from sort of March until October. So you could almost feel a whole year.
Wow. And how many expeditions did you lead or were involved in?
Between 150 and 200 in Antarctica.
Wow.
I don't know exactly, so less than 200, but more than 150. And in the Arctic, somewhat different. You can go to different regions. I spent most time in Arctic Canada and Greenland. And over the course of 10 years, I would say probably 50 trips. I also spent a fair bit of time on the Russian nuclear-powered submarines. Russian nuclear-powered ships that would go to the North Pole. That's not an option for us anymore. We don't lease out those ships anymore from the Russian government for obvious reasons. But that was an incredible time as well.
How fascinating. I mean, these are just phenomenal experiences.
Yeah.
Very hard for any of us that haven't experienced those sorts of opportunities to even fathom or rationalise. But it also had a very profound effect on you, didn't it?
It did. I suppose it was my canary in a coal mine. I can't say that I could see the glaciers melting before my eyes because you'd need photography and many more years to be able to see that. But you can see that over time that the glaciers had melted. But what you could see is the second and third order effects of a changing climate. And I'll give a couple of short examples. One was a penguin colony one year, and there was a really high mortality rate in the penguin chicks. And we were trying to figure out what had happened, and we realised that in the Antarctic Peninsula, the mean or average temperature has typically been below zero, but in more recent years, the average temperature is above zero now by about, this increased by about 2 degrees in that area. And what that means is where precipitation once fell as snow, it is now falling as rain. And the baby penguins, the penguin chicks, they have a down coat. They haven't got their waterproof feathers yet. So if precipitation falls as snow, they can shake it off and it's no problem. If it falls as rain, then it soaks into their down. And if it's sort of a rainy day one day and then quite a cold snap the next day, they have no protection against the cold and they freeze to death. And that's what had happened. So there was events like that occurring more and more commonly. And where I said before that you could go to a particular island and know that there was penguins there was one that we kept returning to, and there was 2 different types of penguin species. And over the course of 10 years, it was dominated, at the start it was dominated by an Adelie penguin and with a small small Gen 2 penguin colony. Not sure if these will mean anything to you, but 2 different types of penguin. And when my last trip there was hardly any Adelie penguins left and a lot more Gen 2 penguins. And we looked at why this was happening. It's because the sea ice concentration was changing. It had diminished incredibly fast. So you still get sea ice there, but the concentration was less. And so the Adelie penguins rely on feeding on krill exclusively, and they rely on the sea ice. And so less sea ice, less krill in that area. And so the Adelie penguins had just gone further south. So you could see these changes. And when you speak to the Inuit who live in Greenland, remarkable people, they were stoked because they were catching fish in their waters that they hadn't seen before in their lifetimes. The fish were migrating north because the waters were warming. So you could hear about and see these second and third order effects, and I knew it wasn't. I knew it was because of the way that we were living our lives, and I had a very comfortable life when I returned home to Australia. But I thought, I can make some changes in my personal life that will reduce my carbon footprint and help to preserve not only our backyard, but these beautiful places that I'd absolutely fallen in love with and worked in for 10 years.
So you've observed these beautiful areas of wilderness. You've noticed and observed these tangible changes over time, and it spurs something inside you to take action.
It does, and that's where my transition job, or my transition career, as I called it, working as a polar expedition leader, turned into the job that I now feel like is my purpose. I had great purpose serving in the military, and now I feel again I've purpose, serving for a whole different reason, serving my planet rather than my country as well.
So you start a company called
I did.
Feed for Thought.
Yes.
And it's involved a lot of research, and I think in 2021, after 2.5 years of research and development, you launched this wonderful new company. Tell us a little bit about Feed for Thought.
Well, Feed for Thought is a dog food made with insect protein as the primary source, in fact, the only source of meat. The reason the link might not be immediately obvious to you working as an expedition leader in the Arctic and Antarctic and insect protein dog food, but the link is that insect protein is not only incredibly good for dogs, it's a meat, and it's a meat that has all 14 amino acids that dogs need to thrive, but it has also got a quarter of the carbon footprint than other traditional meat protein sources. So it makes a lot of sense for dog health and planet health. And so I was the first company in Australia to launch a complete and balanced insect protein dog food, and it's been quite a journey. But that R&D phase was incredible as well. Like, if you'd have asked me when I was that little girl playing basketball and swimming, what my dream job as an adult would be, I wouldn't have said maggot farmer, but I'd started a maggot farm just so I could understand the black soldier fly larvae, the insect that we use in the food, and that was interesting too, like a whole nother world of learning. So I feel like you can leave the army but not stop learning.
So this is a big leap of faith. I can understand your motivation to do so and what it is that inspired you to take this path. But how difficult was it? And were there periods there where there were often self-doubt, or did you question whether this was the right thing? You'd found your purpose, but how did you sort of see that through to actually launching a product?
Yeah, and you've hit a bit of a sore topic here, Paul, because yes, there is still that doubt. There is still that self-doubt, and there is still that, why have I done this? It is, I can't be sure that I can make it work. So yes, lots of questioning. If I'd known how hard it was going to be, I'm not 100% sure I would have done it. I say that, I probably would have, but maybe I would have made some different choices about how I get support along the way. It is a lot harder than I thought it would be. And though there is incredible amount of self-doubt, I can coach myself through that. And I've got a great support network that will always, remind me that, that is not a helpful narrative to have in my head. But what drives me still is knowing that it's the purpose that I want to live out. I have purpose in this, and I want to make it work. And until there's nothing else I can do, I won't give up.
So how is it that you push through those difficult days then?
Just remembering that I'm going to stay in my own lane. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. This is the lane that I want to do. This is what I want to achieve. And I call those girlfriends, and I rely on my support network. I don't want to have other people always pick me up. I want to be able to, conquer the narrative myself, and mostly I can, but on the days that I can't, then that's what I do.
And I know that you're spending a lot of your time travelling. You're working and living out of a van, young family, spending a lot of time on the road. How is it you balance all of that?
Oh, that's such a challenge at the moment because, the privilege of the lifestyle that we've chosen is that we are out in the wild. I'm taking the passion that I have with my business, taking it to the people and the dogs of Australia. I get to meet so many cool dog owners and so many cool dogs and expose them to what I believe is a really great product. But what I don't have is a daycare centre that follows me around that I can put my small baby in. So it just means that my work day is effectively cut in half. I parent for half of it and then work for half of it. And it never feels like it's enough of either. I feel like I've never had enough time to work, and I feel like I never give enough to my son. And I don't think that's unique. I think probably every young parent or every parent feels that tension. But yes, it's real when you're on the road.
How often do you reflect back to that family trip you did around the country, those 9 months on the road as a young Ellie?
I reflect on it a lot because we go through places. I remember we stopped here, and I remember, I remember that we had a great time here. So it comes up a fair bit, and I think the other part I reflect, like my son won't remember this time, but that trip for me, when I was 9, it was one of those core memories. It just shaped, I think, a desire for being outdoors and adventure, and I hope I'm doing the same thing for him. So I think about it in terms of that gift that my parents gave me. I hope I'm passing on.
Of that, I have no doubt. I think it's incredibly inspiring that you've backed yourself to take this leap because you believe in something so strongly. You've seen something, you've witnessed something, you've identified a way to actually make a demonstrable improvement and an impact. I think it's a real credit to you, but I know it's difficult and it can be challenging. So how important is it as a veteran, as a business leader, to access the support that's available to you? And from a veteran's perspective, organisations like Soldier On, for example. But we know that there are so many other organisations that are helping veterans, that are helping business leaders take that next step with confidence.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I suppose what I wish I'd started doing earlier is not being shy about that support. I was at the start when I first transitioned out. I was a bit shy about my military service. I never wanted to speak about it too much because I didn't want to make it about me. It never felt about me. It felt about the soldiers and the job that we were doing. But as I've sort of progressed through this journey, with this business specifically, I realized I'm making a product that no one was really looking for. It feels very Henry Ford, that quote that he said where, if you asked someone back in the day what they needed, they would have said a faster horse.
Yeah.
And he created something different. I feel like I've created something different that people need, but they just don't know they need yet. And it has been really tough. So I think the fact that there are so many different support organisations, I'm now embracing that. I wish I'd done it sooner. So Veteran Business Organisation is a great one for anyone that has their own business. They've been really, really wonderful. DVA has been great personally, just to get your DVA claims in and get that medical support for when you need it. And Soldier On, like I've just attended some Soldier On events over the years, and it's always really good to see how they are supporting veterans. But I think the key message there is that there is an organisation for almost every niche, and they are all there to support soldiers, so soldiers and veterans. So I think just knowing that you're not alone in this journey is important, and reaching out to them and not being shy about it has been a real eye-opener for me.
I think that's the key message, knowing that you're not alone and that support is available in whatever form you might like for that to occur. It is available.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drawing on your military experience, your polar expeditions, and now as a business leader, what advice would you give either a veteran or a family member navigating their own journey and possibly thinking about transitioning out of defence?
I would say that you don't have to, this is from my learnings, you don't have to know exactly what your next purpose is as you leave. It's great if you do. If you've got that sorted, amazing. Follow your heart, chase your dreams. But if you want to transition and you don't, and you know you need a sense of purpose and you don't know what it is, you can still transition and just keep your eyes open and keep your heart open to the opportunities that will inevitably present. You've got great skills, you've got talent and a lot of humanity in the Defence Force, and that is an incredible asset to organisations out of the Defence Force. So if you are open to it, you will find other opportunities.
That's a great point, recognising that the values and the skills that you bring that have been formed deep within those early days and throughout your career wearing uniform are so attractive and valuable to the outside world and to a prospective employer. Yeah,
absolutely. So you don't have to have it all worked out. You can still transition and be open.
Back yourself.
Back yourself, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Ali, for sharing what is the most remarkable story. I mean, it's been an inspiring journey from your days in the military through to polar expeditions and now leading a very value-based organisation, Feed for Thought. It's a real credit to you, and we thank you for sharing that story with us today.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Saluting Their Service, Contemporary Voices of Bravery. Join us next time as we look at another story from a veteran making an impact. This podcast is proudly presented by Soldier On. Soldier On is a not-for-profit veteran support organisation delivering a range of services to enable serving and ex-serving veterans and their families to thrive. Should today's podcast elicit any personal concern, a list of support services can be found in our show notes. Saluting Their Service, Contemporary Voices of Bravery is a proud production of Art Videography and Soldier On. This podcast series was funded by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Thanks for listening.